It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 31, looking at the players of the 2025 African Cup. This episode is looking at the players of Congo DR. Part 2, the selection. Here we go! Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin and this is a continuation of Series 1 on the players of the 2025 African Cup. This episode is part 2 of our coverage of Congo DR's players. The final roster is released and we're looking at the selections of Congo DR. In part 1, we compiled a list of players and their likelihood of reaching the final squad. That was based mostly on their participation from after the 2023 African Cup, that taking place in January 2024, up until the October 2025 games. We considered a few other factors as well. And we also gave some biographical and career information on the main players to help you to get to know them better. In part 2 here, our focus is on the selections, especially the final selections. Before we move on, we want to let you know that in the springtime of 2026, probably April, we will start producing episodes for the 2026 World Cup, which of course takes place in the summer of 2026. So keep an eye out for that, or better yet, subscribe to the channel and it will notify you when the episodes come out. This mediacast is divided into 3 sections. In section 1, just like in part 1, we look at some team information that will be a little shorter than the section we did for part 1. Section 2 here is the main part of the mediacast. We review the list that we compiled in part 1. We're going to tell you who made the preliminary squad and the final squad, and we'll also try to predict starters. We actually took steps towards that in part 1 by providing a narrative on each position over the period. We might summarize that briefly here, or at the very least we'll let you know the outcome of that, which was our early predictions. We didn't talk about them in part 1, but we did take note of them there. We'll also examine the lineups in games played after October 2025 to see if they give any further clues as to who will start. We think with Congo DR, of course, it will, because those were very important playoff games for them. And so finally, using that information or bringing in that information, we'll make our predictions on the starters. Section 3 is really just summarizing, but some important summary information there. We're going to start with our spotlight review, and that is a quick run through of the players who made the squad and our predicted starters. And we'll also review surprise selections and surprise non-selections, as well as new players. And finally, we'll do an update on injuries for Congo DR. So let's jump right into section 1 then, team information. So in part 1, we looked at club affiliations of the players, the games that Congo DR played over the recent period, and their preferred formations. This section will be shorter. We're focusing really just on what the team published. Teams were required to submit a preliminary roster of up to 55 players to CAF, the organizers of the tournament. That's kind of Africa's version of FIFA. For the 2023 African Cup, CAF published those lists, so that made it easy. Some teams didn't like that, though. They felt it had some negative effects. So this time it was up to the teams as to whether they published or not. I actually used Google's AI, Gemini, to get the 55-man roster. But in the process of doing so, I became a bit doubtful about its sourcing and accuracy at times. However, that was just really in a few of the finer details. And overall, I think the rosters are fairly accurate. At the risk of a few mistakes, we are going to use the information here. The final rosters, on the other hand, are very accurate. So teams were allowed to bring 28 players to the tournament, but Congo DR manager decided on a 26-man squad. I think he felt that was a bit more manageable. But it did create problems for him. He published that on December 1st. There was an outcry about some of the decisions in Kinshasa there. And a couple of weeks later, and we'll get into the drama of it all in section 2, a couple of weeks later on December 13th, he added 2 players to the squad, making it the full complement of 28 players. So that is coming from that 55-man provisional squad that they have to submit to CAF, meaning that 27 players were cut from that squad. Before we move on to section 2 and see who those players were, let's take a look at the games played after October 2025. So for most teams, World Cup qualification was done, most teams in Africa. So they were playing friendlies. Congo DR, on the other hand, had 2 very important games. It was playoff games. So the 4 top teams who had finished second in their qualifying groups played off for one final spot coming out of Africa there. So those games took place in Morocco. The first one was on November 13th. And they played Cameroon there. They won that game. And that took them to the final just 3 days later, the playoff final, also in Morocco. And they won that game too. It was a 1-1 draw with Nigeria, which they won on penalties in the end. So Congo DR moves on to the next step there. And in December, they did play a warm-up game for this tournament on December 16th. They had a game with Zambia, played in Spain, and they won that 2-0. In truth, well, we were interested in the playoff results, but as far as this media cast goes, we're more interested in the lineups than in the results of the game. So we're going to look at those lineups. We're fortunate there that they had such important games, because we're pretty sure that they would use their best players for those playoff games rather than the experimental teams that some other teams played in their friendlies in November. So there we have it. 3 games to look at too, so that's also good. And we are finished with section 1. So let's move on to section 2 and look at the candidates. And we begin with the manager. The manager is Sebastien de Sabre, and he's been there since August of 2022. So he's done a good job building the team. I'm not sure he did a good job, though, with the 26-man roster, especially a couple of players he left out led to an outcry. And really, I was really surprised, too, because they were players instrumental in their success over the period. But we will look and see how that progressed once those players come up. So anyway, Sebastien de Sabre leading them through the tournament, and so we'll regard him as a successful selection for the squad here. Let's move on to goalkeepers and see which candidates there were successful. And we begin with 2 definite candidates, Lionel Mpasi, and he was selected for the final squad, and Dimitri Berthaud. He was only selected for the preliminary squad, and is one of the players involved in the drama. There, we'll come to that when we talk about the recent games and the final selections a bit later on, or our predictions, I should say. We had a likely candidate in newcomer Timothy Fayulu. Timothy Fayulu was selected for the final squad. And then we had 2 players seemingly off the squad. They did actually make the preliminary squad. So it's Estras Kabamba and Baggio Siadi. Both of those making the preliminary squad, but not the final cut. We have a couple of new candidates too, and that's part of the controversy. The first one is Matthew Ipolo. who was selected for the final squad. So effectively taking the place of Dimitri Berthaud there. And we'll come back and introduce him because he did make the squad. And we said we would introduce less likely players or new players making the squad in part 2 here. But I'll just mention the other player who was newly added to the provisional roster there, and that is Brudel Ifong or Ifonge. Just making the preliminary squad there. Let's take a look at the Matthew Ipolo. So he's new to the squad. He appeared on the bench twice in their 3 games and subbed into one of them, actually. So part of the squad for those November playoff games and subbed into 1 game. So that gives him 1 cap since 2025. And Ipolo is 20 years old. He plays for Standard Liège in Belgium. He's actually Belgian born. So all of his clubs have been in Belgium there. Yeah, that's as much as there is to say about him because he's fairly young and hasn't been with a lot of clubs. He's been with a lot of youth clubs, Standard Liège and Anderlecht, Besides, and FC Brussels. So kind of touring the top teams, youth clubs in Belgium there. Matthew Ipolo selected for the squad. Okay, let's take a look at, we won't actually repeat the narrative that we did in part 1, but more we'll talk about the outcome of that narrative. Well, we will summarize it in some cases where it's relevant. So I will tell you, Lionel Mpasi had played in the last African Cup, but Dimitri Berthaud was the starter over most of the past 2 years. Mpasi had come back to start the last 2 games in October, so we were unsure who was favoured, but we were unsure between Berthaud and Mpasi, so we're very surprised that Berthaud was not selected for the final squad. At the end of part 1 of our mediacast, again, we didn't talk about starters in part 1, but we did make notes on it, and we had Dimitri Berthaud and Lionel Mpasi as both as possible starters, and we gave an edge to Berthaud. So again, really surprising that he was not selected. We'll look at the November games. Actually, it was Mpasi who started the 2 important playoff games there, and then Timothy Fayulu started the December friendly, and Ipolo came in at halftime there, so more experimental there. But when the squad was announced, which was between those games on December 1st, there was a lot of outcry because Berthaud was not selected for the squad. De Sabre defended himself, saying he had liked what he had seen in youngster Ipolo, but you know, from Berthaud's point of view, it seemed a bit of a slap in the face, not selecting the goalkeeper who had earned 4 shutouts in the first 4 games of African Cup qualifying to get them there. So the manager seemed to succumb to public pressure and reinstated him into the squad on December 13th. You'll remember from part 1, there's basically 2 blank spots available. So reinstated him on December 13th, but it can't have done much good for their relationship, and we can hardly expect Berthaud to be a potential starter after that, or even the second string keeper after so much drama. So our final prediction there is Lionel Mpasi as the likely starter. We're being a bit conservative. We consider him between likely and definite, and it looks like the first backup there is Timothy Fayulu, but we're not dead sure about that either. Okay, that is the goalkeeper situation. Oh, we're supposed to put stars here to indicate our predictions. So it's going to be 2 predictions beside Lionel. Oh, sorry, 2 stars beside Lionel Mpasi to indicate that he's a likely starter. And well, we're not going to put a star beside Timothy Fayulu because we're pretty sure he won't start, but he may be the backup in the case of injury for Lionel Mpasi. Okay, so let's move on to defenders. And we begin with central defenders, and we have a definite candidate in Chancel Mbemba. He's the captain of the team, and he was selected for the squad. We had three likely candidates here. The first one is Dylan Batubinsika, and he is the character, the second character in the drama that we just talked about with the goalkeeper. He was only selected for the preliminary squad there, but later reinstated into the squad. So I'm going to mark that with the brown highlight, and I should have done that for the goalkeeper. I'm just going to go back and do that there. So that brown highlight indicating that he was added to the squad there on December 13th. Okay, well, two other likely candidates were selected for the final squad. The first one is Axel Tuanzebe, and the other one, Rocky Bushiri. Both of those selected for the final squad. Possible but unlikely candidate, Enoch Inonga, sometimes listed just as Baka. Enoch Inonga just selected for the preliminary squad there. And we have no new candidates here. So, yes, I mean, Dylan Batubinsika makes a lot of sense in several regards. The first one is just bringing three central defenders to the tournament, whereas most teams bring 5 or 6, is leaving the team a little thin. And, the second consideration is the role that Batubinsika has played over the period. So, again, another kind of insult to an important player. But anyway, let's take a little look at the situation, or a quick summary of the situation of the position. Chancel Mbemba was an anchor all along in defense over the period, but his partner changed from Enoch Inonga at first to Batubinsika in the middle and towards the end, and then to Tuanzebe for the last game there. And so at the end of part one, our predictions for starters, or our thinking for starters, was that Chancel Mbemba was a definite starter, and Dylan Batubinsika and Axel Tuanzebe were possible starters, maybe challenging each other for the starting position beside Mbemba. And truthfully, we would have given Batubinsika the edge in that battle. However, things became more clear through the November games when it was Batubinsika selected as a starter. And then after that, a shock when Batubinsika was not even selected for the final squad. So here, though to a lesser degree than goalkeeper Bertode, it was the snubbing of a player who had a significant role in their success over the last 2 years. Again, not as much as Bertode. Batubinsika had started 6 of their 18 games, but he had been called up for 15 of the 18 games there. But rather than a public outcry, which actually did happen, but this time it seemed to be an injury scare to Tuanzebe that forced the manager's hand. Tuanzebe had a muscle injury which left him out of the first 2 club games in December. On the same day that Batubinsika was recalled to the squad, Tuanzebe proved fit to play for his club, so the injury worry was averted. So, all in all, I think things worked out well. Batubinsika should be on the squad. Again, probably not good for the relationship between the manager and the player there. And the emotional atmosphere must have been tense for the friendly on December 16th, where both Batubinsika and Tuanzebe sat on the bench, with Rocky Bushiri getting the start there. But anyway, all in all, the drama does make it clear that Tuanzebe is the favoured candidate. So our revised predictions here have Chancel Mbemba as a definite starter and Axel Tuanzebe as the likely starter beside him. Okay, well, that is it actually for the drama. We have gone through the two characters there that were added, or the two players that were added to the squad at the end. So those sections were a bit long because of that, but we can move on now as normal. So let's go to left back situation. Here we have two definite candidates, and that's all we have. And both of them were selected for the final squad. So we have Arthur Masuaku selected, and Joris Kayembe, who had actually been an injury concern at the end of part one, and we will update those injuries in section 3. But the fact that he was selected should give you a hint about how his injury turned out. Okay, let's go back. Let's introduce some new candidates here that were put on the provisional squad. The first one is Vital Nsimba, and the second one, Chadrak Boka. Both of those just making the preliminary squad there. And now we can go and look at the predictions that we had at the end of part one. Well, we have likely the outcome of our narrative is that Arthur Masuaka is the likely starter and Joris Kayembe the possible starter. There's not much doubt that Masuaka is a starter, but over the period he was sometimes absent, or he even played out of position a couple of times. And Kayembe did start enough that he's not just a backup player, but it even begins to look like he's posing a challenge for the starting position. Not really, though. However, Kayembe did play the first playoff match there while Masuaku was on the bench. But Masuaku did start the second one. So perhaps there is a bit of a challenge there. Masuaku also started the December friendly, so seems to be maintaining his spot for now. But we honestly wouldn't be surprised to see a rotation in the cup. Nevertheless, we still give the edge to Arthur Masuaku and give him a likely rating of being the starter, and Joris Kayembe a possible rating of being the starter. Okay, over to the right side. And here we have two definite candidates. The first one is Gideon Kalulu, and he was selected for the squad. And we had a newcomer, but a fairly well-known one, also as a definite candidate, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, throwing his lot in with Congo DR. Even though he was eligible for England and tried to be on their team. No candidates for right back at the likely level, but we also had a possible candidate, Steve Capuati, and he was selected for the final squad. So perhaps there's a bit of backup for the central defence in their choosing three right backs here. We had a possible but unlikely candidate, Brian Bayeye, and he was selected just for the preliminary squad, as was our seemingly off the squad Peter Kioso, just making the preliminary squad. Three new candidates here, as if there aren't enough on the list for one position. We have Jordan Ekoko, not a new candidate. He's been around actually for quite a while. New in the sense that he hadn't played in 2024 or 2025, so we didn't include him on the list. But he was back in our files here, so we can pull his name up to show that he made the preliminary squad. The next one is Jeremy Ngakia, and he well, we won't talk about these players because they didn't make the squad. And the third one is Diu Mercy Amale. So all three of those players making the preliminary squad, but not the final cut. And we probably already have enough right backs with our three here. Let's look at what we thought at the end of part one. We thought the likely starter would be newcomer Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and Gideon Kalulu just a possible starter there. Over the period, Kalulu had a firm grasp on the position in the last African Cup, but only a tentative grasp on it going forward after that. He seemed to survive an early challenge for the position from central defender Axel Tuanzebe, who was tried on in the position. As I say, seemed to survive that, but did seem to lose the position with the arrival of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who started all 4 games in the fall of 2025. So we look at the playoff games. It looks like Aaron Wan-Bissaka there, and that's confirmed by him starting both of those playoff games. Kalulu did start the December friendly, though. Wan-Bissaka was on the bench there, but going forward, we're going to see that the December friendly was a bit experimental. A few starters in that game, but more like the B team players there, which fits the narrative here with Kalulu being kind of the backup player now. So our final conclusion is the same. We see Aaron Wan-Bissaka as the likely starter, almost halfway to definite, I would say, and then Gideon Kalulu as a possible starter. Okay, that's it for defense, and we move on up to the midfield, and we begin with players coded as defensive midfielders, and we have 2 of those at the definite level there. The first one is Charles Piquel, and he was selected for the final squad. The other one is Ido Kayembe, also selected. We had a likely candidate in Ngalael Mukau, and I've seen various renderings of his name. Sometimes he's listed just as IL, as in the last part of his first name there. And so I'll pay attention to that in the cup. We'll call him Ngalael Mukau. He was selected for the final squad there. And we had a seemingly off-the-squad player in Omenuke Mfulu, sometimes just called Nuke Mfulu. He only made the preliminary squad. A couple of new candidates, though, coded as defensive midfielders. Again, not new, but they weren't on our list for part 1. The first one is actually quite experienced with the team. It's Mervel Bope, or sometimes called Mervel Bokadi. And he was selected for the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final cut. And the same is true of Peli Rudok Mpanzu, also making the preliminary squad there. Before we look at the position, though, we're going to look at central midfielders, because there's not a lot of distinction between them. And so for central midfielders, we have a definite candidate in Samuel Mutusami. Overcoming an injury concern there, which we'll talk about in section 3. He was selected for the squad, and the likely candidate, newcomer Noah Sadiki, also selected for the squad. We had a possible candidate in Aaron Chibola. Aaron Chibola, this time, just making the preliminary squad. He was part of the squad for the last African Cup there, but not making it this time. And one new candidate to add, also not making the final cut, Arnaud Lusamba. There. Okay, so a lot of candidates to deal with, but ultimately just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 making it to the final squad. And let's look at the situation. Let's start thinking about the starters here among them. Well, we have Samuel Mutusami as a likely starter. But for possible starters, we think it could be any one of Kayembe, Sadiki, or Piquel. Piquel actually was more, has kind of lost a bit of influence over the beginning. He seemed quite a strong candidate in the last cup, but has kind of drifted towards the substitute bench over the period. In fact, I'm going to repeat the last sentence of the summary from part 1, because it kind of wraps things up well. I said the midfield can effectively be characterized as Mutusami, with a rotation of Piquel, Kayembe, and Sadiki, and sometimes 2 of them. Yes, that is pretty good. Okay, it was a three-man midfield in the playoff games in November there. Mutasami and Siddiqui started both of those games. In the first game, Piquel joined them. And in the second game, it was Mukau, Nagal Ayal Mukau. I think I might have put him in the wrong category on the thing. He was a possible candidate. I had him in the seemingly off the squad slot, so that's why I was confused there. Anyway, Nagala Mukau getting the start there in the second game. The December game, as I've said, looked a bit like a B team in several positions, and here it was Piquel and Kayambe as defensive midfielders in a 4-2-3-1 formation. Nagalael Macau started there as an attacking midfielder. We'll visit him a bit later upfield because of that. But there we have it. So do we change our did it revise our opinion as the starters? Not so much. We do think Samuel Mutasami is still the likely starter, so we're going to give him 2 stars. And all we're doing here is adding Ngalael Mukau to the list of possible starters. So we still think it could be Kayambe, Siddiqui, Mukau or Charles Piquel, and possibly in that order there. And as I said in that summary of part 1, it could be a 3-man central midfield too. So we could see 2 of those players likely starting alongside Mutasami. So I'm just going to put a single star beside each of their names. So Charles Piquel, Ido Kayembe, Ngalael Mukau, and I put him in the wrong spot again. What's wrong with me? And Noah Siddiqui. Okay, that's the central midfield. We move on upfield to the attacking end of the pitch, and we begin with left attackers there. We had no candidates at the definite level, but we we have 2 at the likely level. The first one, Johan Wissa, and not selected for the final squad there. There's a bit of a story behind that, which we'll tell in section 3, but fundamentally we can view it as an injury non-selection. Johan Wissa just making the preliminary squad there. Our second likely candidate, Nathaniel Mbuku, was selected for the final squad. And then a bit of a surprise to me, I got to say, the first possible candidate, Silas Katompa, not selected for the final squad, just making the preliminary squad. Actually, on paper, that does kind of make sense, just the kind of spirit of it or something. I would have thought he'd be selected. Anyway, the other possible candidate, Brian Sepenga, was selected for the final squad. So 2 of the 4 making it. There we have a new candidate to add. It's Michelangelo Balakwisha. There's a little bit of excitement about this player. He was selected for the final squad. Sometimes he'll be called Michel Ange. So it's Michel hyphen Ange, but on some sites, Michelangelo. Anyway, Balakwisha is probably the name to remember, even though I believe he has a brother, but didn't make it to the final squad. I'm just talking too much here. We'll introduce him because he made it, but first we'll mention that another candidate, Jonathan Okita, was named to the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final cut. Balakwisha, on the other hand, did. And he's just new to the team. He subbed into one of the games and appeared on the bench for one of the games and started one of the games over their 3 games in November and December there. Balikwisha was born in Belgium and plays, he plays for Celtic in Scotland now since 2025. But prior to that, all of his clubs had been in Belgium. Royal Antwerp for 4 years and Standard Liège there too. Okay, that is Balikwisha, and we'll move on to look at the predicted starters there. So at the end of part 1, well, we naturally thought that it was going to be Johan Wissa as the likely starter. Of course, it did depend on his availability because he'd been injured a few times over the period. Johan Wissa, the main player in the spot in the last African Cup, and only actually, though, played over a little more than half of the games over the period, and even then some of those games were as forwards, so didn't start in that position that much, but it was kind of assumed that he was kind of the main player over here. In terms of a replacement for him, though, there was no main replacement. Various players came in and went. So at the end of part 1, we could only suggest Michak Elia, who will meet as a right attacking midfielder, as the most likely among possible starters. But really, we awaited the November games, especially since we knew that Wissa was at the risk of injury coming into the tournament. And he was injured for those games too, so we wanted to see who would be there. Well, it wasn't Michak Elia, or really, it was a player we didn't really expect, Nathaniel Mbuku. He had been one of the several players starting once in this position, but really he had started as a right attacking midfielder more, and even as a forward. So even though he's coded as a left attacking midfielder, we didn't really think it would be him, but he started both of the games as the left attacking midfielder, both of the playoff games there. In the December friendly, newcomer Michelangelo Balikwisha was given a try, so again a bit of a B team or experimental squad there. Both of those players, Mbuku and Balikwisha, are coded as left attacking midfielders, so now we're going to kind of favour them above Michak Elia and the several other players who did step into the position. But we do think it's still quite open. But now we'll actually put a likely to Nathaniel Mbuku because he started 2 very important games there. And Balikwisha will give 1 star to him. There's a bit of excitement about him there. And we also think that Michak Elia is a possible candidate here. And we're going to meet him right away as we move over to the right side here. And here we have 2 definite candidates. Theo Bongonda is the first one who was selected for the squad. And the other one is Michak Elia, and he also was selected for the squad. We have none at the likely level, but a possible candidate in Grady Diangana. And he was only selected for the preliminary squad there, and injury likely playing a role in that decision there. And at the seemingly off the squad level, we had Chadrick Akolo. Chadrick Akolo just making the preliminary squad also. 2 other players named to the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut. The first one is Maccabi Lelepo, sometimes called Glody Lelepo. And the other one, Oscar Cabwit, both of those just making the preliminary squad. Okay, let's go and look at think about the starters on this side. And I gotta say, it's a bit like Ivory Coast, where we do have kind of players moving around positions and coming in and out of the squad here. So a lot of movement in the attacking positions. Theo Bongonda started about half the games, but he did play elsewhere, and various out-of-position players like Nathaniel Mbuku and Michak Ilia, who's really a bit of a even more versatile than most of the players over here. Those two appeared on this side as well. So it's almost better to go by how many starts each of the players had and ignore what positions they were in. But I gotta say, even the main candidates over here, like Bongonda and Ilia, only started about half of the games. So here too, we awaited the November games to see if we could get some clarity. In the meanwhile, though, at the end of part one, we had listed Theo Bongonda and Michak Ilia as possible starters over here, but it was just a bit too chaotic for us to make a firmer prediction than that. But in the November games, it was Theo Bongonda in the first and Michak Ilia in the second. So those do seem to be the two main candidates over here. And in fact, Bongonda also started the December friendly. So we are going to revise our prediction a little bit and put Theo Bongonda as a likely candidate. We give Michak Ilia just 1 star over here, but we do think he will be a likely starter on the field somewhere. Of course, he could play on the left, as we've seen, or even one of the other positions that we're going to talk about right away here. Anyway, Theo Bongonda, our most likely starter over here. Let's move on to the central attacking midfield. And this position is not used much. It was used twice in the cup, and the only candidate we have here, we have two. Gail Kakuta was the player who played it. However, Kakuta was not selected for the was not selected for the final squad. He was a seemingly off the squad candidate, so it wasn't a surprise to us that he was selected only for the preliminary squad. However, there was an injury. We'll talk about that in section 3 as well, an injury, and he was recalled to the team. So he does make the team there. We're going to put his name in yellow as a recalled candidate, but he had been seemingly off the squad. The only other candidate we had here was also seemingly off the squad. It's the brother of Michelangelo Balikwisha. It's William Balikwisha, but he only made the preliminary squad and had seemed was not a strong candidate like his brother there. We do have a new candidate over here, and in fact, it's the player that Kakuta replaced. It was newcomer Mario Stroikins. Mario Stroikins was a newcomer who was named to the squad, but then because of injury had to be replaced, and Kakuta came in. We won't do a full introduction for Stroikins, but he does play for Anderlecht in Belgium, born in Belgium, and is 21 years old, so we could see him in the future. Unfortunately, though, not available for this cup, and Kakuta benefits. Okay, we were going to talk about the position. It was used twice in the cup, and Gail Kakuta, who was on the squad in 2023, filled that role in 2 games. Otherwise, they only used it rarely over the period. So we thought at the end of part 1 that if they used, Kakuta was off the squad by then, so whenever they did use it, it was just a random central midfielder. No particular player really occupied the spot. So our conclusion at the end of part 1 is that it was likely they wouldn't use the formation that has this position, or if they did use it, it would be a random central midfielder. The position was not used in the November playoff games there, but in December it was used, the 4-2-3-1 formation. But it was Nagalael sorry, let me try that again. Nagalael Mukau playing in the role. He's coded as a defensive midfielder, so a bit of a surprise there. Kakuta has now returned, so perhaps they will use the position as they did in the last African Cup, and perhaps Kakuta will fill it. But he had been seemingly off the squad, so we don't really think that he's going to be a starter. So our prediction for the central attacking midfield is still likely that they're not going to use it, and if they do use it, I guess it could be Kakuta as a possible starter, but it could equally be a random central or defensive midfielder like Mukau there. So we're not going to put any stars next to Kakuta's name is the long and short of it. And that's it for the midfield. Let's move on to forwards. Now, our last category, centre forwards. And here we had a definite candidate in Fiston Mayele. Fiston Mayele was selected for the final squad there. A likely candidate in Cedric Bakambu. Some might be surprised that he was only at the likely level, but he was. And he was selected for the final squad. And Samuel Essende, also a likely candidate and also making the final squad there. We had two candidates at the possible level. The first one, Simon Banza, was selected for the final squad, but the second one, Jackson Mulaka, only making the preliminary squad there. And we have one new candidate to introduce here, although he just made the preliminary squad. It's Afamiko Pululu. Just making the preliminary squad there. Okay, let's take a look at the predictions. And this was a bit of a chaotic period over the position over the period. It hadn't been in the last African Cup. Cedric Bakambu had started, I think, 5 of the 7 games. But he got injured shortly after the Cup. And then after that, it was really a revolving door of starters. And in fact, Bakambu was merely one of the many players in the queue, even when he returned. He did start the 2 September 2025 games. But in the October games, it was 2 fairly unlikely players in the starting position, suggesting that there was no, kind of firm decision on the matter yet. So here too, we waited for the November games to clarify. Meanwhile, our prediction at the end of part 1 was we were unable to put a starter. I think we had Cedric Bakambu as a possible starter just because we like to have a name in there. But yes, we had no confidence in that. However, the November games did clarify. Bakambu started both of them. And he also started the December friendly. So he seems to be back to being the main man as he was in the previous African Cup. So now we're going to consider Cedric Bakambu a likely starter. We're not willing to go definite on him there. And we give a possible starter to almost any attacker, because we've seen some of the attacking midfielders start as forwards, perhaps even more so than the other forwards listed here. Fiston Mayele is a definite candidate, but he's not much of a starter. He had only started 2 of their 16 games over the period. So don't let the fact that he's at the definite level fool you into thinking he's a starter. All right, that brings us to the end of section 2 on our look at the players. We move into section 3, and we begin section 3. Well, we begin by welcoming listeners to the short version of the mediacast. We're going to begin here with our spotlight review. That's a race through the squad, really covering everything that we've done in parts 1 and 2. Part 1, we compiled a list of players and their likelihood of selection for the final squad. In part 2, we told you who was selected and not selected and predicted our starters. So we're going to review all of that here. I think that's all we'll have time to do in the short version. I won't be able to talk about some of the other matters that we do in section 3, but if you want to catch up with that, the full version will have that. Okay, so we begin with the manager, Sébastien Desabre, causing a little grief by naming a 26-man final squad rather than using all 28 allowable players and leaving 2 fairly important players off the squad. But he later reversed his decision and put them back on the squad. We'll talk about them as they come up. For goalkeepers, we had a definite candidate in Lionel Mpasi, and he was selected. The other definite candidate was Dimitri Berthaud, and he is one of the players in that drama. He was surprisingly not selected, only for the preliminary squad there, and there was a bit of an outcry with that. So eventually he was put on the final squad a couple of weeks later on December 13th. So Dimitri Berthaud, we're highlighting him in brown on the YouTube version of this. That indicates he was a late addition to the squad. Our likely candidate, Timothy Fayulu, was selected for the final squad, and players below the level of possible we won't mention unless there's a reason to, that reason usually being that they were selected for the final squad, and we do have that here. We have a new candidate on the preliminary squad that was actually selected for the final squad, and that is youngster Matthew Ipolo. Making the final squad. So he had taken basically Berthaud's place. And now that Berthaud's been added to the squad, we have 4 keepers coming to the Cup. In terms of predictions of starters, we think Lionel Mpasi is a likely starter, and that's as far as we're willing to go. We don't know which of the others really will be the second string keeper. We think it would be Fayulu, though, but with no great confidence. Let's move on to central defence here. We had a definite candidate in Chancel Mbemba, and he was selected, and 3 candidates at the likely level. The first one, Dylan Batubinsika, was the other character in the drama of non-selection. Long story short, though, and it's a pretty interesting story, but long story short, he was added to the squad later, just like goalkeeper Berthaud was. So Batubinsika ultimately selected for the final squad. As were the 2 other likely candidates, Axel Tuanzebe and Rocky Bushiri there. But that's all we have for central defenders. So just 4 of them. In terms of starters, we think Chancel Mbemba will definitely be a starter. And alongside him, we think Tuanzebe is the likely partner there. Okay, over to left backs. We had 2 candidates at the definite level, Arthur Masuaku and Joris Kayembe, both of those selected for the final squad. And that's all we had over here. In terms of starters, we think Masuaku will be a likely starter and Kayembe a possible starter, although we do see the possibility of them rotating in the position. Over to right backs, we also had 2 definite candidates over here. The first one, Gideon Kalulu, was selected, and the second one, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, also selected for the squad. We had no candidates at the likely level, but possible candidate Steve Capuadi also selected for the final squad, perhaps offering some backup for the central defence position. In fact, he's coded as a central defender, but we moved him over here because he only started as a right back. Okay, so in terms of starters, we give the nod to Aaron Wan-Bissaka. We think he's likely to be the starter, but Gideon Kalulu, a possibility of starting there. Up we go to the midfield, and we begin with players coded as defensive midfielders. We have two definite candidates, Charles Piquel and Ido Kayembe, both of those selected for the final squad, as was our possible candidate, Ngalael Mukau, selected for the final squad. Before we look at our predictions there, we'll mention the central midfielders. We have Samuel Mutosami as a definite candidate who was selected, and Noah Sadiki, our likely candidate, also selected, but our possible candidate, Aaron Chibola, only making the preliminary squad there. Okay, and in terms of starters, we think Samuel Mutosami will be a likely starter, but alongside him, it could be one or two of any of the other players we've mentioned, Charles Piquel, Ido Kayembe, Ngalael Mukau, or Noah Sadiki. Okay, up we go to the attacking end of the pitch, and we look at left attackers. And here we had no definite candidates, but we did have a likely candidate in Yohan Wissa. We're going to tell his story in the injury section, but we'll say that injury caused him to not be selected. He just made the preliminary squad then. The other likely candidate, Nathaniel Mbuku, was selected for the final squad. We had two possible candidates. The first one, Silas, known by various names actually, Silas or Silas Katompa, or Silas Mvumpa. Anyway, he wasn't selected for the final squad, just the preliminary squad there. And the other one, though, Brian Sepenga, was selected for the final squad. We also have a newcomer here, Michelangelo Balakwisha, and he was selected for the final squad. A bit of excitement surrounding him. So 3 candidates selected over here, although we may see them in different positions because there's a lot of shifting around at the attacking end of the field. But we put Nathaniel Mbuku as a likely starter over on this side, or at least somewhere on the field. And we do think that Michelangelo Balakwisha has a possibility of being a starter there. Okay, going over to the right, attacking midfield, 2 definite candidates here, Theo Bongonda and Michak Elia, and both of those were selected for the final squad. However, our possible candidate, Grady Diangana, not selected for the final squad, just the preliminary squad for him. In terms of starters here, we think Theo Bongonda is a likely starter on this side, and we give Michak Elia a possibility of starting on this side. But in fact, we also give him a possibility of starting on the left side too. So we think it's likely that Michak Elia will be a starter in the cup. We're just not sure what position it will be. Central attacking midfielders, we only had 2 candidates at the seemingly off the squad level here, and both of them just made the preliminary squad initially. The first one was Gael Kakuta, and the second one was William Balakwisha. That's the brother of the Michelangelo Balakwisha that we just met. However, we did have a new candidate, and he was selected for the squad. It was Mario Stroikens. However, Mario Stroikens ended up being injured and withdrawn before the tournament, and it was Gael Kakuta who replaced him. That's why we have Stroikens in pink highlight on the video here, and Gael Kakuta in yellow recalled to the squad there. Anyway, we don't put any stars indicating the possibility of these players starting here, because we think it's more likely that this position won't be used. All right, we go on to the forwards then, our last category, and we had a definite candidate in Fiston Mayele, He's not really a starter, actually, but he's always called up. He was selected for the final squad. And then we had two likely candidates, Cedric Bakambu and Samuel Essende, both of those selected for the final squad. And then two possible candidates. The first one, Simon Banza, was selected for the squad, but the second one, Jackson Muleka, just making the preliminary squad there. In terms of starters, this is a bit topsy-turvy over the past 2 years, but Cedric Bakambu was the main starter in the last cup. He wasn't over the 2 years in between, or a year and a half in between. But now he does seem to be the most likely starter going into this cup. So we give him 2 stars. But there is a possibility of it being anyone, not just these forwards, but some of the attacking midfielders like Bongonda and Ilya there. All right, that's the end of our spotlight review. Let's take a look at some of the surprises then. And of course, the main surprise surrounds the drama of the manager snubbing 2 important players there. So Dimitri Berthaud, a notable non-selection, at least on the December 1st roster, and Dylan Bachubinsika also. Berthaud, the goalkeeper, and Bachubinsika, the central defender. Bit of an outcry in Kinshasa, and some other reasons ended up with them both being recalled to the squad and put on the final squad in the end. So they are successful selections there. So maybe we'll move them down to surprise inclusions here, given the drama there. The other surprise or notable non-selection was Yoann Wissa, and that was due to injury, kind of. We'll talk about it shortly when we get to the injury section. We get to surprise inclusions or unexpected inclusions. And with that, we have the return of Gail Kukuta, who was seemingly off the squad and was not selected initially, but when a player had to withdraw injured, he was recalled into the squad. So a bit of a surprise there. We have 3 new players on the squad. The first one is goalkeeper Matthew Epolo. Selected for the squad. We hadn't met him before his name was on the preliminary squad, as is the case with all of these players. The second one, Mario Stroikens, was selected for the final squad, but he was the player who had to withdraw injured and was replaced by Kakuta. So he is not going to be part of this squad after all. And the third new player, Michelangelo Balakwisha, a left winger or left attacking midfielder, also making the squad. All 3 of those fairly young. Balakwisha is 24 years old and Epolo 20 there. Okay, so those are new players. Let's take a look at injuries, and we'll begin with the injury list that we ended part 1 with. And on that injury list, Yoann Wissa was expected back. So let's get into his story. He was out with a knee injury from late September 2025, but he was expected back on December 6th. He did return to play for his club on December 6th. And that was well in time to take part in this cup. He played 72 minutes of a club game on December 17th, fully 6 days before Congo DR played their first game in this tournament. So it seemed like he would make it after all. However, the injury seemed to be used as an excuse for focusing on his club career. He had recently moved to a new team in the Premier League. And injury had really prevented him from getting off to a start there. So it seems like everyone wanted that to happen. So it seems like all sides seem to agree with the decision. I'm a bit surprised Congo DR did, but perhaps Wissa was determined there. Anyway, so we'll call it an injury absence, but it's not really. It's more of a focusing on club absence for Joan Owisa. So we are going to. He did make the. He was placed on the preliminary squad there. We will put him in the. I guess dropped due to injury category because we don't have a better category to put him in. Okay, back in part one, we had two candidates at the unknown injury level. So the first one was left back Joris Kayembe. And Joris Kayembe was out with a hamstring injury since around November 23rd with an unknown return date. Actually, he was still listed as injured for his club on December 19th, shortly before the tournament. But that was a bit weird because he was actually on the bench for the national team 3 days earlier for the December 16th friendly. Anyway, he did come off the injury list around that time and was named to the final squad. So we're going to put Joris Kayembe as recovered from injury, and he was selected for the final squad. The other one was Samuel Mutusami. We didn't know what his situation would be, so we were looking forward to updating it here. It was an unknown injury since late November and an unknown return date, but it turned out to be a very brief injury, and he was back on the field as a starter for his club on December 7th. So well recovered and thankfully able to make the team for this tournament there. Let's see if we have any new injuries. Yes, we do have one new injury, and it's Grady Diangana. Grady Diangana picked up a hamstring injury in a game on December 7th and was not expected to return until January 1st, which was too late for the tournament. However, Diangana was only a possible candidate for us from part one. So we're going to put him in the injured but was not a strong candidate category. He did make the preliminary squad there. And we're not sure how big a role the injury was, whether he was really in the manager's plans for the final squad or not. Okay, that's it. And we have no closing thoughts here on Congo DR. So we're going to move right to the conclusion here and the graphic. We're going to wish you farewell. That's really all we have to say here. I hope you join us for our next team. We would like to thank Pixabay and Cold Fingers for the wonderful music used in this mediacast. The title of the piece is Eid Mubarak.